Hi, I'm Wayne Sotile. Thank you for joining us. I have the incredible pleasure today of having a conversation with one of my truly favorite people in the world, one of Mary's and my daughters, Rebecca Fallon. To set the stage, Rebecca and I are going to have a conversation for you today about the journey of marriage, family life, some of the challenges and joys and solutions perhaps, from a young person's perspective, that's not me, and an older person's perspective, that is me. Mary and I have been married for 44 years now, and Rebecca and Julia are our two daughters. And Rebecca, hi.
Hi.
How about telling folks about yourself?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Fallon. So I am a psychologist as well and have been married to my husband Greg for 15 years. We have two children, Macy, who is 13, and my son Wyatt, who's 10, and have been doing the two-career couple dance for a good while now, and have some thoughts about how to make that work-life balance thing happen or not.
You and Greg have been together, you've been married for 15 years, you've been together how long?
So 18
years. Okay, so 18 years in, let's start here. Are there things you know now that you didn't know 18 years ago that might have served you well to have known back then?
Well, 18 years ago, I was only 10, so yes. No, I think that, along the lines of the intimacy graph that we often show folks in thinking about what does it mean to be in a long-term partnership, relationship, even as it applies, we've talked about how it applies to organizational harmony as well, is that setting out things are easier. And if you expect it to always be easy, you're in for a surprise. Because of course there are ups and downs, and a lot of the things that initially attract you to one another can become the crux of some conflict when you're, 15 years down the road with somebody. Stopping
right there for a second, Beck, if we can. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm interested in this. So how have you, let's say over the 5-year increments of your 18 years or so with Greg, how have you dealt differently with the differences you have? You're more introverted, he's more extroverted, for example.
I think at first it's that attraction, you feel like you're balancing each other out in some really important ways. And then when life gets really stressful, those differences feel more polarizing in a way that is aggravating. And I've just had to stay very aware of us not getting critical of each other, which of course we do sometimes. But the most important part of that equation is also being aware of our own stress levels. And if we're both running on fumes, it's easy to get critical of, how you're navigating this versus me, or you're not paying attention to my stress, that whole thing that I think a lot of working people with children tend to do, kind of that stress, that suffering contest that we get into.
Yeah, or even non-working. I'm home
Right.
with these kids screaming at
Correct.
me all day long, and you're off working.
Right. By working, I mean inside or outside the home. And so I, over the years, have learned different ways of dealing with that and just becoming more accepting of the differences and finding the ways in which they actually empower us, I think, as a couple. There's a lot of helpful stuff. Brene Brown, for example, the psychologist, has a great theory that I think is really helpful about, she calls it a family gap plan, which really what it means is you and your spouse need to communicate every day about how each of you are doing in terms of the percentage of emotional energy you've got left. If we think about, we go throughout our days kind of on autopilot, whether you're working outside the home or you're home with the kids, and what everybody is thinking is, oh, I can't wait until my spouse comes home and he or she can take over with these kids because I'm exhausted. Or if you're out there working, you think, oh, I can't wait till I get home and walk in to a nice peaceful house so I can finally rest. And you're both wanting relief and running on fumes, and that's just not going to go well. And so Brene Brown has this theory that she and her husband every day will communicate towards the end of the day, what percentage are you at, 0 to 100? And if you've had a good day, you might be like, hey, I'm at like 60%. I got a lot of good energy. I'm excited to hang with the kids. And the other person may be at 20%. And her theory is if combined you are less than 100%, you need to change the plan. You need to make some concessions. So let's say Greg's at 90% and I've had an exhausting day and I'm at 20%. That's still more than 100, so great. He may say, I'll take the lead, I'll take the kids out to dinner, you get some work or rest or whatever. If we are both running at 10%, that's sort of a red flag for, we got to do something different this evening. And what does that mean? That means maybe we know everybody needs to go to bed early, so we're not doing soccer practice that lasts till 9 o'clock and we end up eating dinner at 9:30. That's not going to happen tonight. Or we let the kids order pizza and watch a movie and we have a really quiet night talking to each other and catching up about what's going on. Whatever that looks like. I think the other key is on those times when you're both kind of running on fumes, be very careful about your words. Don't have the most difficult conversations. Don't bring up the thing is going to cause a fight. It's not avoiding issues, but it's timing. When you have to be in a good space emotionally and you have to have the energy for those difficult conversations. It's not fair to just come in and drop a bomb when you're both already depleted.
I love that. I love that whole way of thinking about it. It's strategically evaluating and planning realistically. No energy, no good coping. More energy, more gracious coping. And reducing it to one of those vital variables, like let's do an energy check-in. And I guess you could also say, let's do a mood check-in. Even if I have energy, but I'm grouchy or I'm agitated, now is not a good time for us to discuss something that we know is laden with difficulty. Terrence Real is a great marriage therapist also, and he's got a nice concept. Pause, take a breath, and consider when you're getting ready to say something may be difficult for your partner to hear, consider how is my spouse going to feel in reaction to what I'm getting ready to say. And you may be angry and want them to feel negatively, but usually I'm not wanting you to feel negative. I am in distress and I'm wanting to unload something and want you to react. But no energy or lousy mood, not a good time to have those crucial conversations is what I'm hearing you say you and Greg have learned on your best days to do.
Yeah, and I think one thing you learn over time too, which is a little bit of a rude awakening, is that it does take intention and strategy to stay in a positive space with your marriage. I think when you get together, you assume it should be easy. If it's right, it should feel easy. And when it feels hard, it must be wrong. And so the unsexy truth of the whole thing is it's not easy. And the people who are happy have worked and continue to work really hard in real boring ways to stay happy.
Right.
Well,
choose a life endeavor, right? You want to have great physical fitness. It's not real sexy work most of the time. Right. It's, you're doing work other people are not disciplined enough to do, or you want to really advance your career. It's not always fun, and it's not, you want to work, you want to have I know we've talked about this a bunch, that we encourage couples to embrace a marriage, family, work ethic, that there is work to be done over and over and over again. And it's not the same work all the time. Some of it is similar in theme, but the content shifts. But you got to do it over and over and over again. Successful people make a habit of doing things other people are not disciplined enough to keep doing, or not disciplined enough to do for a long enough period of time. You mentioned the kind of tag teaming that you and Greg do. Can you speak some to what you notice in the couples you coach and counsel, particularly from a woman's perspective these days? Because we're always interested in, historically, women have always been the kind of family mental health expert, and women have done the lion's share of home and hearth. And that remains to be the case, but those roles have shifted a bunch. I'm not sure emotions have shifted a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, the concept of maternal gatekeeping, which we've heard about really since the 70s.
Which is what?
Maternal gatekeeping is basically women, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot in terms of the self-imposed responsibility we feel for all things kind of home and hearth related. And so even when, as most women today do, even when you have a partner who is more than willing to help out with all of that, I mean, the generation of men that my age folks are married to do 3 times the amount of childcare, housework, laundry, and willingly do it for the most part. Even when they're willing to do it, what I find with myself and often with clients is women have this self-imposed guilt that about I should be the one. I should be the one to prepare these beautiful meals for my family, but I should be the one to drop the kids off every morning, and it's to their own detriment very often. So you have the other thing is that a lot of women have to learn to let go of is understanding that for your own well-being, you need to let go of control of some stuff in order to stay resilient. And along with that comes letting go of your standards of perfectionism for those things, whatever they are. I mean, your husband is willing to fold the shirts, but he's not going to fold them exactly the way you like them folded. Maybe that's okay in the long run because It saves you 45 minutes of your day with which you can go and do something that replenishes your soul in a way that folding shirts is not going to. Mm-hmm. And why not just accept that and feel thankful that you have a partner who wants to do that? Who cares if the shirts are not folded exactly right? Or whatever it is, you can extrapolate that. He does things differently with the kids. That's one thing I had to learn really early on with Greg, because we have always both worked pretty much the same amount and done pretty much the same amount of hands-on childcare stuff. And when you've got little bitty kids, it is very hard as a mom to let go of some of that, to be gone for the night and trust that he's gonna figure out how to feed them and, diaper them. And, even though I have this incredibly competent, he's a great dad, I know he can do it. Does it look different when he's in charge? Yeah. My daughter, I remember when I was traveling some, she was little, she was like 5, and she said, every time you're out of town, it's really fun with Dad, but one thing I've noticed is everything we eat used to be frozen. And it all starts with a P. It's pizza, frozen peas, and then there was another one. And I thought, okay, so would that have been my choice? Probably not, but you know what? They have fun with their dad, and he plays with them, and all they remember is it's kind of fun when Dad's in charge.
What I noticed about you and Greg, and I noticed this about a lot of couples, that you're a cohort of couples that have moved beyond. When we were coming of age, it was the great husbands or great dads helped out as though it's the wife's responsibility. These are the wife's kids, and I'm going to help out by babysitting my own kids, and it would just infuriate women. I don't want you to help out. I want you to share responsibility. Well, Greg's a beautiful example of a man who shares responsibility for along with you for home and hearth and parenting and so forth. The nuance, I think, you alluded to, and that is, even though, so 2 nuances. One, there is no extra time, I have no extra energy. That would be a good thing for any of us to remember. And if I choose to spend some of my limited time and energy this week fretting about how the shirts were folded, I'm taking it away from time and energy I could spend doing something much more meaningful to my marriage and my family and to myself and my own personal well-being. The second thing that you alluded to that I think has great wisdom, and it is, even though I know my children are okay, my husband's got that taken care of, I have some sadness sometimes because I wish I could be in 2 places at once. Right? I mean, that's something I've learned from talking with you and your sister, Julia, our other wonderful daughter, that even if nurturing, loving people have it covered for me, sometimes I want to be in 2 places at once. And I think that's a big dilemma for contemporary women. Am I right?
Yeah, I think a lot of us have a very ambivalent relationship with career, success, motherhood. And it's okay to own that. It feels confusing sometimes. Where do I want to be and why? And I remember when the kids were really little talking to mom about this. I was gone so much and traveling so much. And I think things do get out of balance. And at that point, it was way out of balance in a direction that for me felt very, very sad, to the point that it was unsustainable. And my instinct was, well, I'm going to quit and stay home forever. Even though what I knew is I'm not going to be fulfilled doing that. I do like to have work that feels exciting to me. And I remember mom saying to me, you can do whatever that is going to look like. If you're happy and fulfilled and able to be present with your kids, they are going to be fine. But what you can't be is just depressed and anxious and ambivalent about everything, because that will negatively affect your family.
Yeah.
So whatever that needs to look like for you, you got to figure that out. And everybody's different in where they land on that. But that's where I think doing your own work comes into play. Because for most women, it's not really about the shirts.
Right.
It's about this deeper message of things have to look perfect, or this is a reflection of you and your worth. And like getting to the bottom of that takes a little more.
Takes a lot
work.
more. Yeah. And that's one of you talked about problems and paradoxes. That's one of the challenges at every stage of the marriage family journey, that we've got a dialectic. There are two opposing realities that I've got to find. It's like, I love my spouse to death and they're aggravating me. I love my kids and they're aggravating me. I want to be home, but I want to work. And that's the stuff we mature into having more or less chaos in dealing with, if not more peace, I think.
Yeah. So, I think I'm at a stage where I've gotten more peace about that, given how long you've been married, since
forever,
the beginning of time. What changes do you see? Like, not necessarily from the very beginning, but even in the last 10, 20 years?
That's a great question. Some things remain constant. The differences in each of these programs we've done, I always cite the statistic because it's an important backdrop statistic that the most happily married people, we have on average 12 chronic unresolved issues. And the stuff that aggravated you the first 3 years of your marriage is going to aggravate you the year 40, 41, 42, and 43. Now, it gets less negatively dramatic, but Greg's going to remain someone who wants to talk more than you do sometimes, or mom's going to remain someone who wants more information than I sometimes feel like talking about. She pays attention to details more than I, and I'm going to remain someone who's more chaotic than she was. So the two things that we, Mary is my wife, in Rebecca's mother, that Mom and I talk about a bunch, and that is, the mistakes we've made remain made. And as you age, you learn to be more self-compassionate. You treat yourself with the same kind of interest, kindness, and forgiveness as you give to other people. And secondly, though, you learn to be more realistic, that the differences that you have between you remain. That doesn't mean you don't grow. You grow more peaceful because you make less of a drama out of everything, whether it's how you folded the shirts or I'm ready to retire and you're not. The decision points are often big. So it's more of an acceptance. That's why people who get, as we age, we get happier in our marriages and typically in our family relationships, but it's not because the problems go away.
Well, Ed, and as you're saying that, I'm thinking of one of the things in the beginning of a marriage, particularly, or a partnership. I think there is, even if you're a logical person, there is this illogical hope maybe that this other person completes me.
Right.
And is just it's going to absorb all of my stuff in the right way at the right time always. And maybe as you get older and wiser, what you do, first of all, is you do some of that work on yourself and recognizing that was never their job.
You can't, well, not only is there the hope that you're going to complete me? If I'm shy and you're outgoing, the two of us get together, I don't have to overcome my shyness, you complete me. But there's also early in the relationship the promise, I am going to fill in the deficits. Your first family hurt you, but my family's so loving and accepting, you join with us and you're going to be complete. And then you realize somewhere around that 15 to 20 year period, you're not complete me, and indeed you aggravate me to death sometimes with these same things. And a lot of people get into real existential funk then. They scream double cross. Like, I thought you were going to love me enough to understand and not be aggravated, but I thought you were going to love me enough to love this stuff away. And that's the real crisis. That's why divorce rates tend to blip in that kind of 11 to 15 year range as one of the blips. So learning to take, number one, we move from, as some folks have said, you move from being self-centered to being more realistic, or from hubris to humility. Is one of the reasons people 55-ish and beyond get happier. All the problems don't go away, but we get less self-centered. You know, and we realize, you know, I've struggled with you about it, but I'm not such a piece of cake myself. And I need to take responsibility for managing my struggles, and I need not to blame you for my struggles. Mm-hmm. At our worst, we're mismanaging our respective struggles and blaming each other for making us feel this way. That's the real quicksand for marriage.
Well, and I think what's interesting too is that at that point, 15 years, 10, wherever that blip in divorce is what happens is people are still ascribed to that myth of you were supposed to fill in these gaps and you didn't, so I'm going to go find someone who will. And so they take the exact same set of gaps right. to their next relationship, right. and that doesn't happen either. And so it is that wake-up call of, this is the work I have to do on myself. And I do think it's interesting too, one thing I've noticed in my work is sometimes it feels like one person in the relationship is doing that work and the other one isn't. And people are really confused about, what do I do with that?
So wisely put. I mean, relationships ought to feel, a high-functioning marriage feels this good working this hard most of the time. Now, there are no perfect people, so there are no perfect relationships. 12 chronic unresolved issues. Everybody gets in the ditch sometimes. Everybody's depleted in energy and in a lousy mood sometimes. So sometimes you got to work this hard to get it back on track. But in a good relationship, that is the ratio. A related reality that you're alluding to is in a good relationships where you only have to work this hard to feel this good are like two hands clapping. If we're both doing our part, let's call time out, have a strategic meeting, do an energy check, a mood check. Thank you for what you do. It allows me to do what I do. You know, there's more than 200% to do. I know the fact that I'm stressed is not because you're bad in some way. That's what the problem, as we've talked about, we do a whole bunch of one-hand clapping, counseling and coaching of people. You know, well, you're not trying. Well, I tried forever and I'm tired of trying, so you try. Well, I'm trying now. Well, I'm not trying. You know, and this is, you know, counselors make a lot of money doing one-hand coaching and counseling. And you can do it now, you can do it later. You can do it in this relationship or the next one or the next one or the next one, but if you're going to get it right, and eventually most people get it right. But one of the sad things we hear in our offices is, I wish I had known now I wish I had known then what I know now and applied it before I went through divorce 1, 2, or 3. I've changed. You know, my new relationship is real different than the old relationship I had, but the truth is I'm different too. Right. And I think that's one of the lessons of aging. We get more humble to, look, take responsibility for yourself. What are your, Gay and Katie Hendricks are great marriage therapists and educators, and they talk about the uns. What are the unfulfilled bargains you made with your partner that you need to apologize for? What are the unforgiven hurts that even if we're apologized for, you still are holding on to? What are the the unspoken feelings. I'm different now as a person this age than I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, much less 20 years ago. What are the unowned aspects of the stuff I've got to take responsibility for, but you so eloquently spoke to. So as you age, I think it doesn't all get easier, but it gets less negatively dramatic, I think.
So as I age, I can look forward to getting more integrated.
You can,
more whole.
if it all goes well,
Yeah.
you got a little ways to go here. In another 13 or 14 years, you'll be very integrated. And really, what happens, I think we alter our expectations, but we don't settle into complacency. The happiest married people do what's called a selective optimization and compensation. We decide as an intentional couple, look, we're shaping our legacy. Now, what kind of family do we want to be? And it starts with how we treat each other. And I'd say this also for those of you who don't have spouses. You know, what kind of mother, grandmother, father, grandfather, aunt, uncle, great aunt, granduncle. You're shaping a legacy based on how you treat your people. And you get to choose, but it's not conceptual, it's got to be actual. It's got to be behavioral. So select one of the characteristics of thriving people in the last half of life is they have goals. My goal is to learn to be a better listener, or learn to take better care of myself physically, or learn to be more patient and loving and tolerant and embrace the differences of the people in my family. You want to optimize, select what you're going to do, optimize by having goals for continuous improvement, and then compensate. And you got to compensate by not comparing your current self to your younger self. It's the way that individuals as we age demoralize ourselves, or couples as we age demoralize ourselves. And it happens in that you choose an arena, whether it's our physical exercise, the family rituals we have. You know, now we've got three families. You're in Greg, in Macy and Wyatt, one family. Julia and Mike and Ava and Michael, their family, and then there's Mary Me. So we've got to change the ritual about how it goes. It even happens in something like a sexual relationship as you age. It changes. You know, you go through the kind of the progression of, you do a lot of things tri-weekly, as in 3 times a week. That you get middle-aged, you're getting there soon, you're going to try to do them weekly, like once a week, and then you get my age and you try real weekly to do them every now and then. So,
are we going to talk about your sex life now?
You got to remember that. That's right.
Okay, so this is a good time to transition into highlighting kind of little specific pieces of advice that I think apply for anybody, no matter where you are in this journey. One of the things, this kind of harkens back to what Mom was telling me that time about, you need to be unambivalent, you need to be engaged. I think if you look at any outcome you want, healthy kids, you yourself aging well, you as a family coping with setbacks, chronic illnesses, aging parents, whatever, one of the factors that keeps you resilient through anything like that is keeping your marriage as positive and healthy as possible. Typically by doing that kind of boring, deliberate work that we talked about. You know, it takes consistent effort. And this is probably true. I mean, I think this is true whether you're married or coupled or not.
I think it's true. If we've studied heart patients, for example, for over 4 decades, I have asked people recovering from a chronic, heart patients and cancer patients, how are you now compared to the way you were before you got the diagnosis? And the stories are always very poignant and always around the theme of before I had that big wake-up call I didn't even know I needed in most instances, I would let negative family process run longer than I come close to letting it run now. One man told me, He said, I'll tell you the difference. The difference is I was visiting my daughter the other day, and he was a widow, and his daughter is a single parent. And I left her house, and I was driving down Silas Creek Parkway, and it dawned on me, I think maybe the way I spoke to Amy, his daughter, was overly harsh. I was trying to express to her my concern about her finances, but I think I might have come across as being critical. So I pulled over to the side of the road, and I called her and I said, sweetie, I didn't mean to be critical. I admire you so much. I know you're doing the best you can. I love you. I'm just concerned for you. He said, before my heart attack, I would not have pulled over. I would not have had the conversation. So yeah, the guidelines you're talking about the things we're going to highlight, what differentiates. There are a lot of different ways to mess up a marriage and family. You know, Tolstoy said this, the philosopher, long ago, that every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Every happy family shares certain characteristics, and these are some.
Well, it's sort of like going back to another thing with heart patients we talk a lot about is they become so much more present and grateful and conscious of almost that concept of uplifts that you talk a lot about.
Yeah, it's a great concept, and it's useful to think about it as a couple, as a family. We have evidence-based uplifts that differentiate people who thrive and those who don't. And the punchline questions here, as I'm running through some of these, when did you last experience this as a couple or as a family? How did you set it up? What were the circumstances? What are you going to do to make a variation of this happen again? When you spoke about what you were grateful for or something that happened you're grateful for, moments of joy, learning something new, laughing together, renewal of a sense of realistic optimism. The world is tough, but we acknowledge the toughness while maintaining an attitude of hope with each other. And we're messengers of hope to each other, that we have the will and the way to accomplish our goals. What gave you a sense of awe and inspiration and pride of affiliation? How do you show love to each other in the many little and big ways? It's a really useful family exercise, a couple exercise, to think intentionally, when did I experience that last? How did we set that up? What can I do? When am I going to do it again? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What would you say? What do you notice differentiates thriving couples or families from those who aren't?
I mean, I think, and I've noticed this with you and Mom over the years, as well as with, you know, even friends I know who I think have good marriages, but also the folks I see clinically who maybe go through a rough patch and then get much better at communicating. It comes down to being really intentional about saying some pretty simple stuff, just very intentionally saying, hey, good morning, you know, I love you. When we talk about that concept of relationships are a bank account and you want to make more deposits than withdrawals, happy couples tend to make those deposits, which can be a thoughtful thing I did for you or a date night that I take you on. But a lot of times it's really our language. It's being curious about each other. Tell me about your day and how you felt about your day. Tell me something I could do to make this day better for you. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm proud of you. I think what people want to know and feel is that my partner sees me and understands me. And so to say, hey, I noticed that you did this, or I'm proud of the ways that you're evolving. I can tell you're working really hard in your own therapy, or I think it's awesome the way you speak to our kids when I don't always know what to say to them. You know, just calling out little things like that, I have found to be so profound in helping people feel seen by each other.
Isn't that amazing? People grossly underestimate what a difference those little things make. Yeah. Particularly the one you mentioned of, I'm celebrating, even though it makes me feel uncomfortable. You talk about as you age, you become more integrated. That's the good news. The challenging news is we become more integrated. The person who's just tough gets more nurturing. The person who's the nurturer starts having a voice. That's an incredible spurt of growth, but it discombobulates the dance. Mm-hmm. And we've got to be interested in our partner's emerging self. That's how affairs tend to happen. Someone else is more interested in the current version of me.
And the thing I've seen couples, if you're together long enough, what happens is what takes the place of communication is a bunch of assumptions. I assume my wife is not interested in this, so I don't talk to her about it. I assume she's not going to have an interesting comment on this, so I don't even, I found somebody else who knows how to listen to me. Right. And you stop being curious. And that's a disservice to the marriage itself. And the other thing I've noticed is that as people start trying to work on this stuff, one thing they're surprised by is how hard it is for the words to come out of their mouth at first. I mean, it becomes, they'll tell me, well, I really appreciate the way my husband does X, Y, and Z, or I noticed the other day he did this and I was so proud, felt so proud of him. And of course the question is, did you tell him?
Right.
And it's like, well, no.
It feels so vulnerable.
It feels so vulnerable. And then to just be aware of how many things enter my head that never come out my mouth, and why couldn't they come out my mouth? What a huge gap that can bridge for people.
That's a great point. That's also what you said reminds me, we also need to avoid the trap of telling ourselves stories. You're behaving in a way differently than I thought you would behave this evening, so I tell myself a story about what, it is always a negative story. We don't fill in with happy stories oftentimes. So it's those little things. I agree with you. How you say goodbye in the morning drives your mood for up to 2 hours, and the attributions you make to that person that you said goodbye to, and how you say hello when you first come back together. Treating each other in those ways that remind you, we're all doing the best we can, we're all stressed often, but hey, I see you and I hear you and I love you and I'm pulling for you, and in fact, I'm your biggest fan, and I give you the benefit of the doubt. If everybody behaved in those ways, there'd be a lot less distress. You're very wise, Rebecca. So let me ask you this, is there anything finally you want to say?
I don't think so. I feel like we've covered a lot. I assume it's not real. You and Mom never really did have sex, though, ever, right?
We only had sex twice. It was for you and Julia, and Mom made me. I was scared.
Yeah.
I was scared.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
So thank y'all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.